Does that apply to ag as well, or is ag exempt from a truck route, or can we define that?
You can make some definitions on truck routes. So what I have seen and what does seem to be legal is that generally speaking, most trucks would have to stay on that route, but you can make exceptions if, say like for like a local delivery route, right? If the only reasonable way to get the truck where it needs to go is off of that truck route. So if they were making, so let's say that we did incorporate the city of Golden, and there was at some point in the future, maybe there's a convenience store or something that goes up there, and they, you know, and they need services that's not, and they're not on one of the truck route, then yes, they could deviate from that, because that would be the only reasonable way, right, to get to that location. And so I think the same would be for ag trucks, that they would need to use the truck route if at all possible, but if it's, you know, if they're going, like say the grain elevator, if it's not on the truck route, they would then deviate from the truck route to get there.
And then is it true, and the sheriff may know better than you on this, but a CDL licensing, a ticket to a CDL individual is a lot more impactful than it is to common population. So the enforcement, I think, could be more meaningful after they get a ticket or two from a truck route that would create behavior change. Is that accurate?
It is, right, to maintain a CDL, that there are requirements that for if they get a certain number of tickets, they can lose their commercial license. Yes, so that's, I mean, if you get to a certain point, you can lose your driver's license the same, right? But it's a lower threshold for the CDL, as well as that being their livelihood. So that creates, I think, like you said, I think that does create more consequence, yes.
So a designated truck route does or does not state the weight limit?
The statutes really don't contemplate that, and so usually I think you would probably want it to state the weight limits, because you'd have to define what a truck is, right? You'd have to define what is going to be subject to that route. And I think, and maybe the sheriff knows this better than I do, I'm not sure, but there's definitions for trucks, and I think a lot of them have to do with weights. Is that?
It is, and there's signs that show
by axle.
the weights that they pose.
Right, and you see that with bridges too sometimes, right, when there's weight limits.
Depending on how many axles they have and.
Right, and so that's something we'd have to, to get together and create, right, the definition of what would have to follow that.
Is the purpose of a truck route to define for whoever the preferred route to take through this territory?
It would create a required route.
Okay.
To go through. Now, there are things that we have to take into consideration. There's federal law, right? There's the Interstate Commerce Clause. We can't do things that are going to interrupt interstate commerce. So I'm trying to think of things states did in the past where they would require trucks to, and so the county would be subject to this, right? Where you'd require trucks to do some bizarre thing to drive through the county. You can't do that because that interrupts interstate commerce. And then the feds would come in and we'd...
roads that Johnson County and Edgerton or whatever put in and go to Homestead and get on the roads that would be the proper thing for, would that be considered too big of a burden? I mean, the deal up there like at Hostess and Cabot is mind-boggling in its relationship to where the Homestead interchange is at versus the trucks coming down 207th Street, getting onto Gardner Road, subsequently going south, from that point, presumably to 169 or K68 and wherever they go from there. It makes no sense when you're in the shadow of the interchange. I understand the straight line, the less miles, that sort of thing, but
As long as it's reasonable, right? So if they have a reasonable route that they can get through the county, right? So east, west, north, south to get to places that they need to go, then yes, you can enforce that truck route. I'd say it's things that would impede interstate commerce. As long as so like I said, if there's no other reasonable route for them to go, that would be unreasonable. But as long as it's reasonable, then yes.
What would be their borrowing capacity or bond limits on their city?